Hey, are you gonna watch that Eurovision movie?
Yes, I am.
I hope it's better than Downhill.
Um, it looks pretty funny,
All right.
so we'll see. I'm kind of actually looking forward to it, but it's really long. It's over 2 hours.
Well, if the music is good.
True, true. And I love a parody song, so it could be good. We'll see.
Is it on Netflix?
Yes, Netflix
Okay.
original.
Maybe I'll check it out as well. I watched a lot of stuff this week.
I did too.
You watched even more than me because I watched some of the same stuff you watched, but you watched more.
I did. I watched a lot of stuff. I was still watching things today.
What were you watching today?
I was at. Well, should we start our intro?
This is what they call a cold open in the biz.
Oh, I didn't know you were so hip to the lingo. Well,
Oh yeah, we should do our intro.
Hi, I'm Sydney,
And I'm Jake.
and you're listening to Two for the Matinee.
And today we're going to talk about Farewell, My Darlings, and Marlowe, and a few other movies.
It's Farewell, My Lovely.
You're right. So, spoiler alert.
Well, I actually was rewatching Farewell, My Lovely today, and then I tried to watch Devil in a Blue Dress with Denzel Washington and Don Cheadle, just because I was on this whole hard-boiled detective genre kick this past week.
And
So that was what I was watching today.
I think I have seen that movie. Remind me of what it's about.
Denzel plays this guy named Easy Rollins, and he gets asked by this dude to go out and find this woman, and a whole bunch of like stuff just happens, in the way detective stories happen.
Is it hot throughout the movie? Like the temperature?
Well, they're in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think I've seen it.
It's a good LA crime noir story.
Yeah, after watching the two movies that we watched for this week, I think I'm not a huge fan of that like 30s, 40s era. I don't know. I don't know what it is about that era.
You're not a fan of that era as portrayed by later eras, or you're just not a fan of it in general, even if it was a film made contemporary to that time?
I think more of it being portrayed later.
Okay.
Because I don't think I've watched very many movies made back then. But yeah, I think the portrayal now, I don't know. There's something about it that just turns me off.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons I'm not going to watch Perry Mason.
Oh, I did watch Perry Mason too last night, episode number 2. Jeff and I really like it.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do have issues with it, but we can get into that later when we talk about the sort of portrayal of the 30s and 40s done in later eras as like historical dramas, because I do have issues.
How is that structured? Is there an arc that goes over the entire show plus like arcs within each episode?
No, it's just one case. So far, I mean, it's only been the one case in 2 episodes that they're working on.
Okay. So he goes from private eye to... he's a prosecutor in the original show, right?
He's a defense attorney in the original show.
Oh, he's a defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think part of the reason he becomes a defense attorney is because, LAPD is fucking corrupt. As we've seen through all these hard-boiled shows and movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was another reason why I was kind of wanting to watch Changeling also today with Angelina Jolie, because it was on my theme of like corrupt cops, LAPD pre-1960s. Not saying that they weren't corrupt after, but man, it was outrageous.
Yeah, I never saw that one. That's the one where her child goes missing and then she gets the child back, but it's a different child?
Yeah, the cops give her a child back and then she's like, that's not my kid. And the cops are like, yeah, it is. And if you say it's not your kid one more time, we're going to lock you up in the loony bin. And they do. And it's a true story.
What happened to her real child? Pedo ring?
No, he's murdered by a serial killer who's operating at the same time killing kids.
So why did they give her the wrong child?
Because they wanted to close the case and have a happy ending for press purposes, because shit's corrupt.
Well, I just finished season 3 of True Detective, and that season there was the police department tried to close the investigation prematurely 3 times. I mean, they did, and they went after the wrong suspect each time, just to like get it off the books and move on.
Well, that Michelle McNamara documentary that's coming on about the East Area rapist, there was a great podcast called The Man in the Window about it. And basically, yeah, the cops, like, they were ignoring clues and wouldn't work with other agencies out of ego. And so they let this rapist serial killer pretty much go free and not caught because they couldn't put their egos aside to work with each other and share information.
This is the Golden State Killer.
The Golden State Killer, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna watch that because Courtney's a big fan of stuff. So I promise
You should tell her to listen to The Man in the Window. It's a great podcast.
Man in the Window.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chilling stuff. But yeah, so I watched Perry Mason. I watched the 2 movies for this week, which were Farewell, My Lovely and Marlowe. Then I watched the original movie, the first movie of Farewell, My Lovely, called Murder, My Sweet from 1945. And it has a lot of the very same dialogue, but there's some changes that were made in the story. True Detective, if I didn't say that already.
You finished it?
No, I'm on episode 5 of season 1. I was going to try to finish season 1 yesterday, but I didn't get through it.
Well, I don't remember. Have you seen the Dragnet movie?
No, I mean, I've seen the Dragnet movie, but it was a million years ago. And I used to watch, I like that show, Dragnet.
Oh. Well, we'll have to come back to that. So I watched Ford versus Ferrari, which I liked a lot. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
It's on HBO. It's like a good spectacle. I don't know what genre you'd call it. It's not really action, I guess. Christian Bale and Matt Damon are really good in it, and it's just very satisfying. Okay. And the racing cinematography, I thought was really good. So that got me interested in other racing movies, which I haven't seen, like that Le Mans movie with Steve McQueen.
Yeah, and Grand
Prix. Which actually isn't like Grand Prix is well reviewed, but Le Mans isn't. I think it's like 60% on Rotten Tomatoes.
What's the racing movie with Paul Newman? He has a racing movie from the 70s too.
Does he?
Yeah.
I can't remember
what it's called. Much like Steve McQueen, James Garner, Paul Newman was also a race car enthusiast.
Interesting.
Which makes them all even more appealing.
Then I watched Fun with Dick and Jane.
Oh yeah.
Because
I watched that one too.
Right, and I saw
forgot about that.
I saw it pop up on Amazon, and I was like, I should watch that because I hadn't seen it in a long time. I remember liking it, and then you mentioned you watched it and you liked it, so I watched it again. And that movie is just so good, so good. And the best thing about that movie, I don't know if you noticed, is all the supporting characters that only have like maybe 1 scene or 2 scenes, but they're also like unique and hilarious. Like the construction guy at the beginning who starts going off about like astrology.
Oh yeah, that's so
us
random.
Aquariuses have it bad this week or something. And then there was his boss, the clerk at the DMV who explains to him the difference between homosexual and transsexual.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Like her dad that just goes on this rant about self-sufficiency. I mean, it's just like every scene with all these other characters are so good, so funny. I mean, like the script should be taught, I think, in screenwriting classes if you want to make your movie world sort of come alive. And I was thinking about like those supporting characters in this movie, and it's like you compare that to one of the problems I had with Downhill with the German lady who was just like a caricature and wasn't really funny. So like this in Fun with Dick and Jane, this is an example of like how to do that well, where it's actually interesting and it has a point and it's funny and it's not just like a joke.
Right. I concur 100%. And speaking of satire, I forgot that I watched this, and then I watched The Bling Ring as well, which is another social satire. Sofia Coppola's movie about the the teenagers who robbed in all those celebrity homes in Hollywood, like about 10 years ago.
When did it come out?
I think like 2013 maybe.
Huh, I've never heard of this movie. And you liked it?
I don't know if I liked it or not. I'm glad that I watched it. It had some interesting things going on in it, but I think it's flawed in that it's too repetitive. They keep showing the kids breaking into these celebrities' houses over and over and over and over again, so it gets to be really repetitive. Like, we know what's happening. They don't have to keep going in there and partying. They did it like 7-8 times, and I think that slows it down because it's not that long a movie. And I think they could have used that time to sort of explore the satire more of like these kids who want to live these sort of Instagram, Facebook lives on social media. I don't know. I mean, if you have the time, it might be worth watching just because there's some interesting things going on there.
So it's a satire of social media culture.
It's a satire of like consumer culture, social media culture, celebrity culture. Yeah.
I also watched Baby Boom per your recommendation, and I was disappointed.
How could you be disappointed in Baby Boom?
I think you liked it because you could relate to a woman moving from the city to the country to have a kid, to raise a kid and start her own business.
I don't know how you cannot like Baby Boom. I think that just really is disappointing to me. I just think Baby Boom is just a great movie. It has no lull in it. It just moves along. It's funny. It's sweet. It's clever. And I love Diane Keaton in it. And I just don't get it.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that clever.
Oh, God.
The only thing I didn't expect was for her to start her own business. Although, like when I saw all the jars of applesauce or baby food, I'm like, is she gonna try to sell these?
I like it. I think it's a rent it, but you don't have to because it's free on Amazon right now.
Rent it.
Yes,
wow.
Baby Boom is a rent it, partially out of spite because you don't like it.
I regret watching it. I could have watched something else. So just skip it.
Are you serious?
Well, part of it, I think I don't like Diane Keaton outside of Woody Allen movies for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Like I feel like she works really well and for like those Woody Allen characters, but then all the other movies she's in, I don't know, I just find her kind of annoying.
Oh my God. Have you seen Reds?
Oh, I started watching it and then I realized it was just Warren Beatty wanking off for like 3 hours, so I stopped.
Oh my God, I love Reds.
It felt like very self-indulgent.
I mean, I'm going to agree. It is extremely self-indulgent, but I just think it's a great story. And yes, he cast himself as a heroic lead in that story and like the moral arbiter of this group of people, but I just really liked it a lot. It's one of my all-time favorites. I don't watch it all the time because it's like a million hours long, but I love Reds.
Maybe I should give it another shot. I mean, it deals with like the Soviet Union. That's what sparked my interest.
And then sort of American communism in the 1920s and American socialism and the push that these intellectuals have to, I don't know, better the lives of everyone in America, the worker and minorities, and the government's sort of attempts to cut those movements off at the knees. I love it. It's so good.
Well, I'm actually reading this book about Hitler and Stalin right now, so it would be somewhat relevant to my interests. Maybe I'll give it another shot. And then the last thing I watched was Out of Sight.
Oh, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, I'd never seen it, and I've always thought like, oh, I like the Ocean's movies, and I like David Soderbergh's movies in general, and I like Clooney, so I should watch this. And I watched it, and I didn't like it at all. And I looked up the reviews, and like the critics really, really liked this movie. Ebert liked it. I think one of the consensus comments was that it was, I guess, up to that point, the best version of a Elmore, what's his name?
Elmore Leonard.
Yeah, one of his books. But and they I don't know if you remember this, they did an interesting thing which they also did in 187, where when everything takes place in Miami, like the color palette's very bright, kind of like gold tinted or whatever you want to call it, and then when they move to Detroit, it's all very blue and white.
In my mind, I remember that movie as being golden.
Well, yeah, because it's like most of it takes place in Miami, but then like the last half hour when they go to do that robbery, it's in Detroit. I don't know. Like, I think when you film a book, you don't need to film it word for word. And there's these very long, boring scenes of dialogue that I think were supposed to come off as like witty or cute, but I was just like bored. I mean, there was like a 10-minute scene of Clooney and J-Lo in the trunk of a car getting to know each other.
I remember that. Yeah.
I'm just like, how long is this going to go on for? But I think it's supposed to be like sexy.
I think it was sexy, right? There's that bathtub scene. That was sexy. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if I watched it as a teenager, I'd be more into it. It just felt like kind of like a shitty Tarantino Guy Ritchie mashup. So, and before this episode is over, we're going to have to rank our Marlows.
Oh, True. We should. I already know who my number one is.
Are we including Bogart here?
I mean, you should include all the Marlows.
Well, there's like I think two other ones
Well,
that I'm not familiar with.
I saw the Dick Powell Marlowe because I watched Murder My Sweet.
Okay, so I can't participate in that.
Well, you can
But
rank the ones that you've seen, and I'll rank the ones that I've seen.
Okay, cool. So should we start with Farewell, My Lovely, since you've seen two versions of it?
Sure. Let's do it.
Farewell, My Lovely is a 1975 film by Dick Richards based on the novel by Raymond Chandler. It stars Robert Mitchum, Charlotte Rampling, and John Ireland, and it's about a Los Angeles private eye, Philip Marlow, who's hired by a paroled convict, Moose Malloy, to find his girlfriend, Velma, a former seedy nightclub dancer.
So, this movie had a lot of narration in it. What did you think of it?
The narration?
No, the movie in general.
I have to say, I did not like it. I liked Mitchum. I liked Mitchum a lot. There's something very likable about him. I haven't seen Cape Fear though, because he's the villain in that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I kind of want to watch that.
He plays good villains.
Yeah, which is interesting because this might be the first Robert Mitchum movie I've seen. And he's just like, he's really charismatic, and I like watching him. But one, like the dialogue, the snappy comebacks, it was like I liked it at first, and then it was just too much. It was like too much of a good thing. But I think that's what
the book is.
Style,
that's
right?
That's Marlowe.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's a matter of taste. And I was kind of watching it based on some advice you gave me, which I think was good advice, is that the mystery is sort of incidental to the movie. Just kind of like try not to think too much about the mystery. Just go for the ride. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, because these movies, especially these hard-boiled movies and those film noir movies, the mysteries are so convoluted that the mysteries are like secondary to what the characters are doing to each other.
Yeah. And I liked all the characters. I liked the two cops and how he was sort of friends with one of them, and the other one he was just giving a hard time to all the time. This movie features a young Charlotte Rampling, who I've only known as old Charlotte Rampling, and she was really good. Yeah, but it's just, I don't know. It didn't quite work for me. I did like how it started out. You were talking about the narration. And also what it does is it's like he's narrating a story that he's telling to a detective. So it sort of starts out in the present, and then he recollects what happened. And it starts out with you knowing that there's like 7 bodies that's piled up as a result of what's happened. I think it's 7.
Yeah, I think it's 7.
And so I did like counting the bodies as they were showing up throughout the movie. So I thought that was a nice little trick they did. It also features a very young Sylvester Stallone.
Very young Sylvester Stallone. Little baby Stallone.
I don't even remember if he had a line.
No, he did, because he liked that girl.
Oh, yeah.
The prostitute that worked at the Madam's house.
And it was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer.
I saw that, yes.
And probably one of his first.
It's probably his best film.
Hey, now. But I don't, like watching this, it made me think of Chinatown and how great Chinatown is. And this just feels like very, very bland in comparison. But I read Ebert's review. He gave it 4 stars. I mean, he thought this was tremendous. Like, he thought it did an amazing job of creating that 1939 or 41.
I think it was like, what did he say? The Hitler had just invaded Russia. So that's
41,
19, is that 41?
Yeah, so creating that atmosphere, Ebert thought he did a great job there. He really liked Mitchum as Marlowe as opposed to Elliot Gould. She mentions in his review.
Yeah, I have to agree with Ebert. I give this 4 stars. I thought this was great. But I'm also a fan of hard-boiled detective movies and fiction. So for me, this was right up my alley, and I appreciated the throwback style of filming this movie, but at the same time the grittiness of a movie that's made in like 1970 in the 1970s, because you know how I feel about things looking dirty, and they should be appropriately grimy for the situation, and this movie did a great job with that. Like Jesse Florian's house, loved it. Yeah. That grimy seedy motel, so seedy and grimy, so perfect. I mean, I just felt like I was in that place. They're walking down the street and there's trash all over the street because, yeah, the past was dirty. People threw their trash on the ground. Perfect. Loved it. That's my problem with Perry Mason. It's too clean for being the same like city. And like, I think Perry Mason's 1920, 1930. That shit should be grimy as hell. And there's no trash on the street and all the cars are super shiny and washed and clean and waxed. And it takes me out of the time period. I don't like it.
I wonder if that has something to do with when these movies are made, because so you watched the other version of this that was made in the 40s.
Yes.
Was that also dirty?
No, because the difference is
I bet it wasn't.
they film those mostly on sound stages,
Right.
Whereas Farewell My Lovely, you can tell these are locations, dress locations. So it's a whole different sensibility, and there's an artifice to those movies in the 40s, but you suspend that because you know that when these are made.
Well, as we've talked before about the 70s, I mean, they were dark times. So I think the fact that this was made in 1975 contributes to the aesthetic of it looking so drab.
Yeah, but there are other movies, like the contemporary movies that are grimy.
Contemporary to what?
Like they might be set in the past, but they're made in the last like 15 years. And I've seen them be grimy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a conscious decision now, but I'm just saying generally. And set design, I mean, again, I guess it depends on who's got the say in terms of the vision.
Yeah, I really feel like my thing is I need to have a company that comes in and grimes up movie sets.
I could see you, like, if you were a set designer, just getting into fights with like directors and producers, like, no, this has to be dirty, filthy.
Peel that wallpaper. Peel that wallpaper.
You just take like a crowbar and start bashing the cars.
Well, yeah, I mean it's 1930. Not every car on the street is going to be a model 1930 car, right?
Right.
Okay, so why are we doing that, Perry Mason?
It's interesting. I was actually just thinking about what cars look like because in Out of Sight, they drive around this like super long, old. I don't know what brand of car it is, but like one of those cars from like 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing that's interesting is like you don't really see old cars on the street anymore.
Well, there's this one car that drives through my neighborhood, I swear to God, every day. And it's like a 1976 Rolls Royce. And every time I'm outside, if I see the person pass, I like have to give a little cheer because I'm like, I love that car.
Right. And because don't you feel like it's an exception? You go back to when you were a kid, there'd be a lot of old cars.
Yeah.
Driving around.
Yeah.
So to your point, I think in the 40s, not everyone could afford a new car. It's probably more expensive to own a car.
Right. And so there's lots of cars on this. There should be lots of different cars on the street. So the fact that Perry Mason's walking down this Los Angeles street, and one, almost every car is the same model. Two, they're all super clean and there's no dirt on the sidewalk. This is where my company would come in and be like, we've got to change this up. This is not real.
Hey, maybe you found your niche.
I don't know why I care about dirt so much. Maybe it's because I care about like authenticity and being put into the moment. Because if they're going to focus on realism on so many other things, like the violence, like there's this really sort of graphic scene where he walks in the second episode where he walks in and finds someone who has committed suicide with a shotgun blast to the face. Okay. Y'all want to go all in on this shotgun blast to the face, but you can't put some dirt on the street. Like, come on.
Well, going back to Farewell, My Lovelies, so you said you're a fan of the genre. So I guess my question is, what makes for a good like 40s hardboil noir versus a bad one? Or what's an example of a bad one that you didn't like?
Oh, let me see. Good question. You know what? It's when they play too hard into the genre stereotypes.
But didn't this movie do that?
No, I don't think so.
Did you feel like it subverted the genre at some point?
No, I don't think it subverted the genre at all. I feel like it was true to the origins of the genre.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Because this movie, compared to the original, which I watched both with Jeff, and he actually liked the original better because he didn't like the 70s doing the 40s. He liked the movie being contemporary to its time. So a 1940s movie made in the 1940s. So it's just a contemporary movie.
Yeah, I mean it feels more authentic because I feel like the sensibilities, the way the characters behave, the psychology of the characters that you sort
But
of
it's
infer.
not though. It's like whitewashed for the studio system. So we don't get any Jesse Florian. Well, there's one scene with Jesse Florian in the original. They take out Amthor becomes a man, and he's not he's not he
A
doesn't own
madam.
a madam, obviously, and he doesn't run prostitutes. The old Florians, which is now, because Moose Malloy, he meets Moose Malloy, and Moose Malloy is like, I'm looking for Velma, cherchez la femme. And she used to work at this place called Florian. So Mitchum's Marlowe makes a point to be like, well, that neighborhood's changed now. He calls it, quote unquote, that's a colored neighborhood now. And they go there. That's not in there. They go to Florian, so there's just a bunch of white people in there. So that whole dynamic, that whole scene where you see the police corruption and you see how police treat the black victims of crime, that's not in there because it's 1940s Hollywood, and those things aren't talked about, and they're completely washed over and pushed to the side. So there's the grittiness of it, because that's more along the lines of truthfulness than what we get in a studio film produced in 1945. It's gone.
But that's my point. The 40s movie is about a movie that takes place in the 40s that looks like the 40s versus the movie made in the 70s that takes place in the 40s is about the 70s. Like we've
No,
talked about
that's
this
not.
before.
That's what. But in the book, though, the movie from the 70s stays true to the book, which has him going to Florian's, and Florian's being a place that in the neighborhood that has turned to African American neighborhood. That's true fact stated. That's what happened. That's in the book, but we don't get that in the 1940s movie because it's the 1940s and they don't put black people on the screen. And we don't get the madam and the prostitutes because it's 1940s and they don't put that on the screen, but it's in the book because that's what's existing in real life in Hollywood and LA in the 1940s.
Right. So the books, it sounds like the book was sort of ahead of its time because it wasn't reflecting the pop culture at the time.
I mean,
And
I think books and theater of that era are more a reflection of what's going on in society, and the movies have their own agenda, and because pop culture is really not really the same kind of thing as we think of it now, because the movies are like doing what they do with a set of rules that they have that's dictated by an outside agency, as well as what they think white America is going to see.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think like just talking about the race element, I feel like in the 75 version, because the 70s, like we just come off like the 60s and the 70s, there was that we'd gone past the civil rights movement, and there was this like trend to like discuss race more, or like the problems with policing or whatnot. So the 70s movie puts that in there because that was in the sort of the zeitgeist of when it was made. But in the 40s, I think race relations were in a different position. So the movie in the 40s would reflect that, right?
No, I don't think that's what's happening at all. I think there's a whole world operating outside of what the movies are doing. The movies of that period have nothing to do with reality. There's nothing going on in those movies that reflect any sort of reality going on in America at the time. The movies are fantasies, and any attempt at realism, is not going to fly. I think I mentioned The Best Years of Our Lives once on here, and that movie came out in 1946, and that's them saying, hey, when the soldiers came back from the war, they couldn't get jobs. Why is that so revolutionary? Because they would never put anything like that on the screen before that period. Anyway, I like Mitchum's narration.
I'm just spitballing here.
Anyway, yeah, I like Mitchum's narration.
So that's definitely a renter for you.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I think it might be one of my new favorite movies. So for me, it's funny because I think this movie gives a good snapshot of a time and a place, even though it's made 40 years after or 30 years after it's supposed to take place. And I love movies that do that.
Well, it's a streamer for me. Moving on to another Philip Marlowe. Marlow is a 1969 movie directed by Paul Bogart, also based on a novel by Raymond Chandler, and stars James Garner, Gail Honeycutt, and Carol O'Connor. And it's about a young woman from Kansas who hires LA private detective Philip Marlow to find her missing brother. So this movie I liked a lot.
Did you really? Why?
I did. I think for one, it takes place during an interesting period because it's contemporary. So it's filmed in 1969. It takes place in 1969. And I find that historical period, I don't know, for whatever reason, more interesting than the 40s and the 30s. I thought it was like kind of stylish. I like the stylishness of it.
Yeah, I thought there were some parts that were kind of cheesy.
Yeah, okay, this movie features Bruce Lee, and at one point James Garner fights Bruce Lee, but he doesn't really fight him.
No, he just moves back and back and back.
Yeah, and then Bruce Lee goes for some crazy flying kick and flies off the roof or the penthouse of a building. My main problem with this movie is I felt like Philip Marlowe, the character, like we never really got his point of view. If you're gonna set this guy up in 1969 or 1968, whenever it was filmed, I almost wanted like his perspective on the times. If that makes sense. Almost like the way that was it Ed Carney in The Late Show?
Oh, Art Carney, yeah.
Art Carney, yeah. Like he was sort of reflecting on the world around him, but in Philip Marlowe, he was kind of bland. Like he had his like cute little one-liners. But like I never really got a sense for who he is, not in the same way that I did with Mitchum in Farewell My Lovelies.
Yeah.
And I know you love James Garner. I don't know.
I didn't think he was a great Marlowe.
Yeah, he wasn't great.
Especially after all the Marlows that we've seen recently, he's not a great Marlowe. Even though I do love James Garner, I was kind of disappointed.
But this was another case where I thought all the minor characters or supporting characters were pretty interesting, and whoever the actors they cast to play them were all really good. Again, the mystery, I don't know.
I was gonna say the mystery. I'm like, whatever. I don't really know what was happening.
Interesting bit of trivia. So it's directed by Paul Bogart, who is not related to Humphrey Bogart, but Paul Bogart's daughter was married to Elliot Gould twice.
Really?
Yeah. Just an interesting coincidence.
I wish I was married to Elliot Gould once.
Well, what did you think?
I basically agree with what you're saying. One of the problems I did have with this was I hated when it was obviously a soundstage. They didn't need to do that. His office was a soundstage. And then the house, I think the front of the house was on a soundstage. I wish they had just gone for more realism. I wish they'd gone for locations instead.
That's interesting because I didn't really notice that. Maybe I don't have an eye for that.
Yeah, that kind of bothered me. And James Garner's Marlowe was lacking. But I really liked Rita Moreno's character, the lady who's like the striptease dancer.
Yeah, she was good.
I really enjoyed. And then there's a scene that I actually really loved in this movie where there's two sisters and they don't get along and they're looking for their brother and it's a whole thing and the mystery doesn't really matter. But they come together at Marlowe's house and they start fighting. And I just thought that was the best scene in the whole movie because it was just really like it was no holds barred and it was great.
That was a good one. I actually, now that I think about it, I think my favorite scene was like the long striptease sequence where like she's trying to do her burlesque dance and Marlowe's backstage throwing out his questions or conclusions to her and she's sort of trying to respond. Mm-hmm. I like the tension there because she's trying to keep up appearances, but he's confronting her about the truth at the same time. I thought that was really well shot. And I really like the music in this movie too.
Yeah, I did too. And then that last scene when he leaves and gets in his car and he goes out into the street. That was a great scene. That was what that's why I wish they'd done location shooting for the whole movie because it just looked fantastic.
Neither Ebert nor Siskel like this one.
Yeah, I mean it's got some problems. It's not great, but it was fun to watch.
Yeah, and it felt like even though the subject matter was kind of serious, it felt lighter than any of the other Marlows we've watched. And it like those one-liners, I felt like maybe that's the thing. Like the one-liners fit better because it was more comedic. So I can kind of buy them more versus Farewell My Lovelies, which is pretty dark and pretty serious, and he's just having like these snappy comebacks all the time. It just felt out of place.
Yeah, that's why they go better. They go over better in The Long Goodbye too.
It's like I think the tone, like
Even though that's not a comedy, but the tone is different. It's not as than Farewell My Lovely.
yeah, and it's a different Marlowe. Marlowe himself in that movie isn't very serious, and then there is a lot of comedy in it with like Augustine and some of the other characters, like the weird hippie girls. So I think, yeah, like you need that tone for the comebacks, the snappy comebacks to work.
So who are your top Marlows?
Wait, so is this a streamer or a renter?
I'll say this is a streamer.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I'm gonna rank Elliot Gould, Robert Mitchum, James Garner, and Humphrey Bogart because those are the four I've seen. And I know this is probably like sacrilege, but I cannot stand Humphrey Bogart, so he's last.
Really interesting.
Yeah,
well, that's controversial.
I wonder if it's just like that was the acting style of the day, but he's just like so wooden and boring. And
and everything you find him like that, or
well, I've seen Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. He's Marlowe in The Maltese Falcon, right?
No, that's Sam Spade.
Oh, Sam Spade. So maybe I haven't seen him.
He's Marlowe in The Big Sleep.
Well, I assume he plays it the way he played in the other two movies.
That works. I think that's fair.
So he's going to be last for me. And then I guess Garner would be third. And then I guess Mitchum first and Gould second, I think. I don't really have a strong favorite. That's the thing.
I don't have a strong favorite either. I think I would put Gould at number one for mine and Mitchum second. Third, I would put Dick Powell and then Bogart then Garner, then Bogart. Because I agree. I'm not a Bogart fan either.
Good. We agree on something. In
yeah, this people, he's so great in this. And I was like, yeah, but I don't see, he's not an actor where I see his films on and like, I have to go watch that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you take Casablanca, which I'm not a huge fan of it, but I can see why it's a great movie. But everyone in that movie is better than him. Every character, every actor is more interesting. He's the weakest link.
I'm trying to think of Bogart movies that I really like. So I really like this movie called High Sierra where he plays like this outlaw. But the character I like the best is Joan Leslie's character, who is like the girl that he's in love with because she's kind of like a bitch and a user. And Ida Lupino's character, which is like the loyal girl who will go down with him fighting in the end. I like them better than I like his character of the gangster. I'm trying to think of other ones. There's one called In a Lonely Place. I actually like him in that because he plays like this crazed writer who's like on a downward psychological spiral. So he's actually good in that one.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be a different role than what I've used to see him in. I feel like I don't know if I've seen any John Wayne movies, but like the parts I've seen, it just he comes off sort of the same way, very wooden. It's like very strong and silent, but like to the extreme.
Yeah, he's not one of my favorites either. I don't ever seek out John Wayne movies.
And I guess I don't know. You could kind of say the same thing about Clint Eastwood, but he has something that Bogart never, at least for me, Bogart never had.
Sacrilege.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a true cinephile.
I mean, I think people have their own opinions on things, and you like what you like. It doesn't take away from anybody else's liking of it. If you like Bogart, more power to you. I mean, I love tons of stuff that's crap.
No, the problem is if certain people who have influence like certain things, then certain types of things get made.
So who do you think could play Marlowe today? Like who could play a young Marlowe, and then who could play like a grizzled Marlowe?
So not serious answer, Ryan Gosling.
You really? I feel like Ryan Gosling's Marlowe would be more in the mold of Elliot Gould's Marlowe.
No, see, I'm thinking like Gosling and Drive. I think he'd be more of sort of like a Bogart.
So a bad Marlowe.
Like the strong silent Marlowe. But I could see him playing it either way, but I think he'd go in like sort of that classic direction.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I don't feel like he's too skinny.
I think Jake Gyllenhaal is like one of the greatest actors of the last 20 years.
He would be fantastic actually as like the sort of Marlowe from the Dick Powell age of Marlowe's, sort of younger.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be really good. He could also be a sort of James Garner type Marlowe, because he can do like a little light comedy.
He can do anything.
He can do anything. He's amazing. So yeah.
It's Jake Gyllenhaal. All right. So how are we gonna take over the world next time?
I should make you watch Reds. No, I'm kidding. Because I don't want to watch Reds. This is Sydney.
And this is Jake.
And you've been listening to Two for the Matinee.
Join us next time when we talk about Carol and bedrooms and hallways.
So be there or be square.
And farewell, my darlings, aka lovelies.
I'm going to murder you, my sweet.